Destiny 2's new expansion, Edge of Fate, is almost here, and it's the perfect time to lock in some killer builds. I'm putting together future-proof setups for every class, meaning you can rock these builds forever without worrying about the seasonal artifact mods. Today, we're kicking things off with Titans. Let's be real, Titans need to be even more broken. If you want to see builds for the Hunter and also the Warlock, be sure to smash that like button and let's make it happen. You don't want to get left behind when the new content drops. Get your Titan ready to dominate right out of the gate. Before I start explaining about the build, let's head to the exotic armor pieces. For this build, you can choose between either using the Syntheseps or Stoicism. But if you don't have these perk rolls as for the Stoicism, such as Spirit of Assassin or Syntheseps, or this one, Spirit of Inmost Light or Syntheseps, you can freely use the default version of Syntheseps. Also too, if you are using the regular version of Syntheseps, this will also increase your super damage whenever you're surrounded by 50%. And if you are one of those people that are just using the Stoicism for the Spirit of Syntheseps, or that 50% increase in damage for your super, it will not apply to the Stoicism. So this build has plenty of survivability, and you guys will not have to worry about that. If you guys want to know the numbers of how much melee damage you're going to be receiving whenever you're surrounded by enemies, you'll be granted a 165% increase in your melee damage. And why I chose to put Syntheseps, because of this aspect called Consecration. Yes, this aspect did get a nerf with its damage, but it still packs a punch. For this build, you are going to be stunning every single champion in the game. And to start off, for the aspect, which is Consecration, you're going to be stunning unstoppable champions because this aspect will also ignite enemies, which is one of the weaknesses to unstoppable champions. To sum up this aspect, all you're going to want to do is run, slide, activate your charge melee twice, and that enemy will explode. And if you want to get 3 charges of Consecration for your abilities, for your melee, you're going to want to go for Frenzied Blade because this melee ability will grant you 3 charges. So now you're going to have 3 Consecrations. And to increase your melee damage even further, the next aspect you're going to want to put is Knockout. So it would, 1, make you amplified whenever you get kills with your melee abilities, or just your basic melee. It would also restore portions of your health, and if you were to defeat more powerful enemies, it would increase the amount of health you get back. They also changed how amplified works now, so whenever you get amplified applied to you, you will get a plus 15% damage reduction. And whenever you're critically wounded, or if you were to break a shield from an enemy, it would increase your melee range and damage for a short time. So this aspect will give you an extra 50% increase in melee damage. This also stacks with Syntheseps. So if you were to activate Syntheseps and Knockout, you'll be granted a 215% increase in your melee damage. For your abilities, on your class ability, you can freely choose any class ability you like, but I would like to go for Towering Barricade just to block more projectiles. Next is the Grenade, and you can choose any grenade you like, but if you guys didn't know, if you were to activate your Glacier Grenade and then activate your Consecration, you'll insta-destroy the Glacier Grenade. That's the only reason why I put Glacier Grenade, but again, you guys could freely choose any grenade you like. If you want to stun Overload champions, you can go for Suppressor Grenade. If you want to have an additional way to stun Unstoppable champions, you can go for Shackle Grenade. But we are using a weapon for this build to stun Overload champions. We'll get onto that later. Next is the Super. You can freely choose any super ability you like, but in my personal opinion, when it comes to endgame, I would recommend going for Glacier Quake or Thunder Crash. But remember, if you are using the regular Syntheseps, be sure to be surrounded first if you want to get that increased super damage. And the only reason why I put Glacial Quake for this build is to grant us more Darkness Transcendence energy, but we are using a special weapon, which is the Lost Signal, that will grant us even more Darkness Transcendence energy, but still. To activate Transcendence, all you need to do is apply either light or dark damage, and once those 2 bars are filled up, activate your Transcendence, and it would override your grenade into this electrified snare that will suspend and jolt enemies, so you can be able to stun Overload champions and Unstoppable champions just from this grenade. You could also use Kinetic Weapons, but in this build we are not doing that, but Kinetic Weapons will also be granting you light and darkness energy for your Transcendence. For the Fragments, it's mainly tying to survivability and with our melee. So for survivability, I went with Facet of Protection, which will grant us a damage resist whenever we're surrounded by enemies, and while we are Transcendent, the effect is increased. So we're going to be getting a 32% damage reduction when we are Transcendent. But if you are not, you'll be granted a 15% damage resist. You're also going to be getting plus 10 strength, and if you want to increase your damage resist even further with Amplified as well, for your stats, you're going to want to go for Resilience, because if you have 100 Resilience, it would give you a 30% damage reduction, and it it would also reduce your class ability cooldown because resilience ties to titans. The next fragment I went with is Faceted Blessing for more survivability. Melee final blows start health regeneration, while your Transcendent melee final blows start health regeneration for you and your nearby allies. I am also using an armor mod that would also grant us HP as well, but hey, more healing the better. This fragment will give you your weapons the ability to stun anti-barrier champions, so it would provide your weapons radiant whenever you were to get a powered melee hit, or if you were to get a powered melee final blow, it would make you and your nearby allies radiant, but sadly you get minus 10 strength, so this buff will last up to 5 seconds whenever you activate Facet of Dawn. And radiant would also give you a 20% increase in damage to your weapons. The next fragment is Facet of Ruin, tying it to our consecration and also our glacier grenade and glacial quake if you are running the grenade and the super. So it would increase the size and damage of the burst whenever you shatter a stasis crystal, so that would be your glacier grenade and your glacial quake, or frozen targets. If you didn't know, you can actually freeze targets with your grenade and your super. All you would have to do is let the crystal spawn close to that enemy and the enemy will get frozen. And it would also increase the area of effect for your solar ignitions, and that ties to consecration because this aspect creates ignitions. You're also going to be getting plus 10 mobility for this fragment. The last fragment, you can freely choose any other fragment you like. This is kind of like a free fragment slot, but I went with Facet of Balance just to give us even more melee energy, even though we are going to be getting Transcendence extremely fast, but you never know. So rapidly defeating targets with light damage grants melee energy. Rapidly defeating targets with darkness damage grants grenade energy. But mainly for this fragment, we're tying it to that increased melee energy for light damage kills. This weapon is a dark transcendence energy generator because this is an area denial frame. So it creates this lingering pull on impact that deals damage over time. And in order for you to generate darkness transcendence energy, you're going to want to deal damage to enemies with darkness damage. So that would be strand or stasis. So this is a stasis area denial frame grenade launcher. And for the perks on the third column, you're going to want to go for auto loading holster. And I do recommend to enhance it just to revert the perk as it was before, because they did nerf auto loading holster. So if you don't have it enhanced, it's going to take a little bit longer for this perk to activate. So the holstered weapon is automatically reloaded after a short period of time. On the fourth column, you can choose between these two perks. The first one is what you're seeing here, is one for all. Hitting 3 separate targets increases the damage. So this will give you a 35% increase in damage for this grenade launcher, because your main goal for this grenade launcher is to hit as many targets as possible to generate darkness transcendence energy. But if you don't like to use one for all, you could also go for Vorpal. Vorpal is a passive damage increase towards mini bosses, bosses, and vehicles. So for your special weapons, you'll be getting a 15% increase in damage to those enemies. For the weapon mod, I went with tactical just to increase my handling. Ignore the reload speed, I only went with the handling. So for the main premise for this grenade launcher is to hit as much targets as possible to generate darkness transcendence energy. So this is the weapon that can be able to stun overload champions because of this perk on the fourth column called the jolting feedback. Dealing repeated damage with this weapon will inflict a jolt. Whenever you're amplified, jolt is applied faster. So we are going to be getting amplified because of knockout, so we're going to be applying jolts faster. On the third column, I went with attrition orbs. Just dealing damage to enemies will generate an orb of power, which perfectly ties to jolting feedback because that's what you need to do to activate jolts for this auto rifle. The reason why I put this auto rifle is the origin trait called Braid Legacy. When we damage with this weapon, it will generate a small amount of ability energy for the one closest to a full charge. And lastly, for your weapon mod, I would recommend going for synergy, because whenever you get kills with this weapon, it would have a chance to drop an ionic trace. And if you didn't know, ionic traces grant ability energy to your grenade, melee, and class ability. And lastly, I decided to put this auto rifle because this is a close range type of build, and you're going to need some range depending on what activity you're playing. So that's why I put an auto rifle. And also for the power weapon, I went with this arc linear fusion rifle called the Queen Breaker. Back in the day, this linear fusion rifle was the worst of the worst, down in the dumps, in the pits of hell. It was so garbage, nobody wanted to use it until they buffed it and made it more better. And on the first column, if you want to deal high amounts of damage, you're going to want to go for combat sights. That just makes it into a 3-round burst. And also too, you're going to want to get the catalyst for it that gives you rewind wounds. So when this magazine is empty, it refills it from reserves based on the number of hits. So let's just say you were to shoot all of your 5 shots on an enemy, you're going to be getting all of that back. So be sure to don't miss. But if you do, that's a rip in the chat. On the third column, you're going to want to go for quick draw just to pull it out faster. That's what she said. But if you do want to stun unstoppable champions with this linear fusion rifle, you can. All you would have to do is hold your reload button to swap the perk. And the perk to stun unstoppable champions is Marksman Sights. This is a long range sight with lower charge time, but greater damage. And all you would have to do is just shoot the unstop and he'll get stunned because it blinds them on hit. And as what you see here, arc blind effects stun unstoppable champions. So let's go over how you could be able to stun every single champion in the game. Let's start with overload champions. The first one is either using this arc auto rifle with jolting feedback, or whenever you activate Transcendence, you can use your electrified snare to jolt the target as well. For unstoppable champions, you can use your Queen Breaker for your first perk, which is Marksman Sights, or you can use your Consecration, your Glacier Grenade, your Glacial Quake, and last but not least, the electrified snare. For anti-barrier champions, the only way to get this is by gaining Radiant from this fragment, Facet of Dawn. Let's start with the armor mods. For the helmet, I went with Harmonic Siphon because I am using Glacial Quake as our super, and we are going to be getting rapid kills with our Lost Signal. So whenever we get rapid kills, it would spawn in an Orb of Power. The other mod I went with is Arc Siphon, just to tie to our Arc Auto Rifle because we have jolting feedback. Again, this drops an Orb of Power whenever we get rapid kills with our Arc weapons. You could also do this with the Queen Breaker as well, but mainly towards our Auto Rifle. And lastly, I went with Hands On, just to grant yourself more super energy on melee kills. We are going to be getting Transcendence very quickly, so if you guys would like, you can go for heavy-handed on all three of them, but I decided not to do that because it's too expensive. But heavy-handed, whenever you get a powered melee final blow, it will create an Orb of Power. So if we have 2 copies of this, the cooldown for producing that Orb of Power is 5 seconds, but if you have 3 copies of this, it would give you a 1-second cooldown. And on the third mod, I went with Impact Induction, so whenever you cause damage with a powered melee attack, it will reduce your grenade cooldown. For your chest armor piece, we're tying it to survivability, so you can choose any resist mod you like. So I went with Harmonic Resistance that ties to your super, so it is a stasis damage resist, and then I went with solar resist and then melee damage resist. You could also go for Concussive Dampener, reduces incoming area of effect damage from combatants. That's for, like, example, you're dealing with an ogre and he were to slam onto the ground, you'll deal less damage to that. But in most cases, it's going to be close and personal, so I went with melee damage resistance. For your leg armor piece, this is the mod that will grant you healing whenever you pick up an Orb of Power, and this is Recuperation. So this will give you 75 HP per Orb of Power pickup. Yes, we are getting Transcendence extremely fast, so you don't really need to put these 2 next to armor mods, but do it if you like. I went with Invigoration, which reduces your melee cooldown whenever you pick up an Orb of Power, and for Innervation, same thing for the other one, but this one reduces your grenade cooldown whenever you pick up an Orb of Power. And for most of my builds on the class items, I would always go for these 3. The first one, whenever we activate our class ability, and whenever we get a kill afterwards, it would spawn in an Orb of Power. And as we activate our class ability, we're going to be activating Powerful Attraction, which collects nearby orbs of power around us, so we won't have to manually go towards those orbs of power. We'll just collect it automatically. And also too, I also go for a special finisher, so it will consume 3 of your armor charges and it would convert that to special ammo, and you'll be granted that and your teammates as well. But if you do want to change up these armor mods, you can freely do so. So here's the gameplay loop for this build. As soon as you load up into an activity, be sure to use up all of your consecration. Once you do, you're going to want to be able to generate your Transcendence energy, so use your Lost Signal for the darkness energy. And if you do need more light Transcendence energy, feel free to use your weapons such as the auto rifle and the Queen Breaker. Once you have both of those ready and Transcendence is ready, activate it, get as much kills as possible with your consecration, and also use your electrified snare for more crowd control. Once it's over and you have your super ready, activate your super to guarantee yourself to get your full darkness Transcendence energy, and then use your consecration again to get your light energy, and then your weapons, and rinse and repeat. For every build I make, if you guys would like to copy it for yourself, the dim loadout link will be in the description. Also, the mobilytics. I would greatly appreciate it if you were to hit that like button and also subscribe. We are so very close to hitting 8,000 subscribers, and I appreciate all of the support. Again, if you'd like to see a build on the Hunter and Warlock for future-proof builds, be sure to hit that notification button to never miss out any Destiny 2 builds. Take care and peace.